Okay, this one is going to be a complicated build. We are going to create a low frequency oscillator that will modulate whatever our audio signal is that's coming in. So I'm just going to go through and get rid of a ton of objects that I no longer need, including, I'm sorry to say, our scope. And I'm going to get rid of all of these sliders except for rate, depth, and our dry-wet balance. I'm also going to create another multiplier. This one is going to be times 1 point, however, and that will become important later. This is going to be our wet signal. I'm going to connect it up to there, and then that will go into our dry-wet balance just as normal. I'm going to also align this patch cord to get things out of the way because we're going to need some space here. So when creating a low frequency oscillator, there are a number of different waveforms you can use. And I'm going to show you a couple, but I want to be able to select between them. So I'm going to first create a U menu, which I will then edit the files that are in there, the menu items, to sine, saw, triangle. I'm going to use this to select between those various waveforms. I'm also going to create a load mess, give it the option 0 so that it will automatically load the sine wave whenever the patch starts. From there, I am going to create a select that will take 0, 1, and 2, which is going to be the index number chosen, if it goes to the first inlet, the index number chosen from the U menu. Cool. Now, this is where everything is going to get really ridiculously complicated really, really quickly. So let's talk about this. What I want is effectively to have a cycle, a sine wave. And with this sine wave, I only want it to play when the sine wave is selected. So to do that, I'm going to create some logic that will turn it on when it receives a 0 and turn it off when it receives anything else. That is going to go into a multiplier for the sine wave. Let's get that out of here. And this is going to connect to a toggle so that we can see how this works in real time. The toggle's not actually necessary. I could have that go directly to the multiplier, and that would be fine. Before I do that, though, actually I should do one more thing. I need to have that depth in there. Hey, let's get rid of that. And multiply. And I need to give these some default values. Oh, hello. Becoming a bit of a patching nightmare here. Well, let's take this out. Double click. That's going to be 0 point. 0 point. And now, okay. So cycle. Logic gate to tell it to go in or out. And then I'm going to have that scaled by depth. For the rate, I'm going to change the values for the range from 0 to 33, which is human audible at that point, but I like to go a little bit above the audible range of 23. And then that will connect to wet. Okay. At this point, it should work. Let's try it. But let's also change the values, because again, building a pedal board and you want to reuse your code, you're probably going to want to change the name of these. Oh, and before I forget, let's do the receive too. Okay, good old Anton. I'm going to select the sine wave from the menu, and you can see that it has activated this toggle. So at this point, the sine wave is coming out of cycle. It's being multiplied by the depth, which is currently nothing, so let's give it some values just by moving that because it was set to whatever was default. And now it's being multiplied by 1, so it's coming through and passing down here. At this point, when I bring up the dry wet, I should be able to hear the sine wave affecting the audio going in. So cool, I get a nice tremolo effect, and then as I increase it, it starts to do a little bit of amplitude modulation. So that's just kind of a classic tremolo pedal. But now we're going to get a little bit more complicated. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy everything that's in here, duplicate it and bring it out, and I'm going to change the waveform to a phasor. So now the second input in my U menu is a saw. So now here's what I want to do. If it receives that 1, which is going to correspond to the index for the saw, I want it to send to the 1, which will turn the saw on. If it receives a 0, I want it to turn 0 to the saw and multiply it to get 0. And if it gets 2, which is the triangle wave that we'll create in a second, I want it to get another 0. Now I need to connect up the rate, I need to connect up my depth, and I need to connect this to the output. Okay, well, let's try it. So I'm on sine, and I've got the sine toggle showing that it's working. Let's change that over to saw. And it works. Success. Let's give it a different rate and a depth that's slightly the same, and let's hear that sawtooth LFO goodness. Cool. And then last but not least, we'll duplicate this one more time. And this time, we're going to use a tri, which is the anti-aliased triangle oscillator. And remember, this takes an initial frequency number. We're just going to give it a 0. And it takes a duty cycle. I'm going to give it that duty cycle of 0.5, and that will give it a perfect triangular shape. Otherwise, it wouldn't know what to do. It would freak out just a little bit. This time, I'm going to select if it matches 2. Let's space that out, because that's the index for the triangle wave, and if it does, I want it to turn this on. And if it's 1 or 0, I want it to turn the patch off. Again, I need to give tri a rate, I need to multiply by the depth, and then I need to output that to the wet. All right, so there's a new value, there's a new value. Let's try it. Okay, tri works, sine and saw are both off. And it all works. This, again, is pretty complicated. You have to test and make sure that what's going out of select is going to the correct box. That if you only want 0 to go to this one, that is, in fact, only going to that one. That if you want it to go to the phasor, it goes to the phasor. That if you want it to go to the triangle, it goes to the triangle. And like I said, do not forget that you have to give triangle an initial frequency and a duty cycle, or you're not going to get anything coming out of it that would be usable musically.